Chapter 1. The Undervalued Sister. The Collins family dinner in Seattle was supposed to be a simple gathering, just 3 siblings, their partners, and a table full of home-cooked dishes. PureHarvest, while Vanessa chimed in with stories about exclusive dinners and luxury hotels. The two of them sparkled with self-satisfaction, him in his tailored blazer, twirling her wine glass in hand. "What are you up to these days?" "Still working part-time at that library, was it?" Lena looked up and met her sister-in-law's carefully neutral expression. "No, I left that job a while ago. I'm doing something else now." "Oh!" Andrew raised an eyebrow, finally moving on from those side gigs. "If it was really going somewhere, you'd have said something before. Sounds more like a passion project than a business." Lena didn't respond. Andrew and Vanessa had assumed she was directionless simply because she didn't flaunt titles, wealth, or influence. It wasn't just disrespect, it was erasure. She had become a convenient placeholder for failure in their success story. Their voices faded into the background as Lena let her mind drift. She remembered being 12, sitting in the corner of the family living room while Andrew opened his first college acceptance letter. Their parents had cried, hugging him, calling him the future of the Collins name. Lena, sitting across from Andrew and Vanessa, she realized nothing had really changed. She was still the forgotten one, the unspoken one, and they, still blind to what they could not measure in numbers. "I guess everyone's not cut out for the fast lane," Vanessa said with a half shrug, refilling her glass. "Some people just prefer small, quiet lives," Andrew added, slicing through his roast. Lena stood up slowly, picking up her plate. "Excuse me," she said, not waiting for permission. She walked into the kitchen, her heart pounding, but her face calm. She needed a moment. Not because she was hurt, but because she had outgrown this. They didn't know. They didn't know about the 7 patents filed under her name. They didn't know that the woman they treated like a charity case had just been featured in Forbes Tech Watch under a pseudonym, Dr. Lena Collins, the brilliant but elusive founder of NovaGene Tech. Entering the kitchen with a smile that somehow always felt like it had terms and conditions. "I'm good, thanks," she replied, rinsing her plate. He leaned against the counter. "Don't take what Vanessa said the wrong way. She just wants you to do better. We both do. You've got potential, Lena. But potential doesn't pay rent, you know?" Lena turned off the faucet and wiped her hands on a towel. "You're right. But sometimes, people build things in silence that outlast noise." Andrew blinked. "What's that supposed to mean?" She gave a soft smile. "Nothing, really. Just thinking aloud." As she passed him on her way out of the kitchen, she felt a sense of clarity settle in. She no longer craved their validation. What they would discover soon, far too soon, was that the person they'd always dismissed would soon hold the key to their future. And when that moment came, she wouldn't need revenge. Swallowed by the gentle blur of rain on the train window, she didn't look back. She didn't need to. Inside the envelope was her acceptance letter to the Stanford Biotech Incubator Fellowship, a full grant, housing included, for 1 year of independent research and business development. It wasn't just a prestigious opportunity, it was an escape. She remembered the night she applied for the program. The application window was closing in less than an hour. That commitment had brought her here, rolling quietly through Oregon pine forests, heading toward a future that no one else had imagined for her. As the train sped along, Lena's mind drifted back to the conversations she'd avoided in recent weeks. Her brother Andrew had called once, leaving a message about a family dinner to reconnect. But Lena never returned the call. The last dinner had left a sour taste in her mouth, and she had no desire to subject herself to more polite cruelty. Vanessa had emailed her once, too, though it was clearly out of obligation, not concern. The email was curt, asking if Lena was doing okay financially and offering a list of job openings at Vanessa's company. She was still the little sister who never quite measured up. But Lena was no longer interested in being seen by people who only look skin deep. The train pulled into Sacramento for a brief stop. Lena stepped off to stretch her legs, her sneakers splashing in the light puddles along the platform. A woman in a blazer bumped into her while rushing past. Proper urgency. That was the moment Lena decided she would never chase profits, she would chase impact. NovaGene Tech wasn't born out of ambition. It was born out of grief, determination. Lena pulled out a small notebook and opened to a page filled with scribbles and diagrams, molecular pathways, gene editing workflows, projected cost models. This was her world now. Quiet, focused, and a heart that burned with quiet certainty. She took a deep breath of the crisp California air, standing still for just a moment to take it all in. Her rented studio apartment was small but clean. One bedroom, a kitchenette, and a large window overlooking a courtyard of succulents and hummingbirds. The first night, she unpacked just two things: her laptop and a framed photo of her and her college mentor, Dr. Elias Tran. The next morning, she walked into the incubator building for the first time. It smelled of whiteboards, espresso. Lena's station was the smallest, just a desk, a lab bench, and a fridge. But it was hers. On her first day, she spent 13 hours sketching out the roadmap for what would become Project Viridian, a biotech solution aimed at early detection of degenerative diseases using gene expression biomarkers. It was a long shot. It would take everything she had. And she was ready. Late that night, after most of the building had emptied, Lena walked down the quiet hallway and stepped onto the rooftop garden. The city sparkled beneath her, hundreds of glowing offices, blinking signals of dreams in motion. She didn't feel small anymore. It meant reclaiming ownership of her story and choosing not to explain it to those who never cared to ask. The day she disappeared wasn't dramatic. There was no announcement, no letter. And never looked back at the family group chat that had slowly devolved into a string of birthday wishes and property updates, none addressed to her. She moved into her new apartment in Palo Alto and allowed the distance between her and Seattle to grow not just in miles, but in meaning. The truth was, her presence had never been celebrated in that household. Her absence would hardly be noticed. Andrew and Vanessa didn't call. Maybe they assumed she was still drifting between jobs. What they didn't know was that Lena had secured her first private research grant within 3 months of joining the Stanford incubator. She had convinced a skeptical panel of investors with nothing but a laptop, a data model, and a fierce presentation about early gene expression markers in neurodegenerative diseases. She had stood in front of a room filled with venture capitalists, most of them men, most of them skeptical, and made them believe. The check came in 2 weeks later. $500,000 in seed funding. She remembered the last time she had tried to share good news with them, back when she had graduated summa cum laude from Caltech. She had sent an email with her commencement speech attached, a photo in her cap and gown, standing beside her department chair. The only response had been a short text from Andrew. Nice. You going to get a real job now? That was the day she learned not all silences are empty. Some are filled with years of disappointment they expect you to fulfill. So she stopped trying. She stopped updating them on her milestones. Stopped attending awkward birthdays where she was introduced as the quiet one. She deleted the automatic calendar reminder for their anniversary dinner. She even let Christmas pass 1 year without a single card. And no one called to ask if she was okay. While her physical presence disappeared from Seattle, her digital shadow began to grow in Silicon Valley. Her startup, now named NovaGene Tech, began attracting quiet attention in the biotech community. She and Ethan Moore, her trusted co-founder, and the only one who truly knew her story, worked 12-hour days refining their prototype. Ethan, a former Harvard biochemist turned startup dropout, had met Lena during a guest lecture. He had been intrigued by her questions, her refusal to accept easy answers, her unusual combination of empathy and ruthless focus. He had offered her a coffee the next day. A week later, they were sketching gene sequencing algorithms on napkins at a diner. Ethan became the first person Lena allowed into her new world. One evening, as they reviewed data in the lab, Ethan glanced over and asked casually, "Do your folks know what we're building?" Lena didn't look up. They wouldn't understand it. Or care. He didn't press further. He understood. There was a quiet strength in her detachment, a refusal to let bitterness rot the foundation she was building. Still, a part of Lena couldn't help but wonder, if one day her name appeared in a press release, would Andrew recognize it? Would he tell people, "That's my sister," or would he scoff and say, "It can't be the same Lena?" She didn't know. She didn't care to find out. 1 week later, Lena was invited to speak at a closed-door biotech summit under her professional name, Dr. Lena Collins. She delivered a keynote about ethical gene therapy and was offered a place on the advisory board of a major healthcare nonprofit. She declined the offer. It wasn't time yet. But the ripples had begun. Her company website showed no photos of founders, only a minimalist banner that read, "Innovating where it matters most." The world outside was beginning to whisper her name in boardrooms and think tanks. The world inside her old family circle remained silent. And that was fine. Lena had not vanished. She had evolved. She wasn't hiding. She was becoming. Chapter 4. The Birth of NovaGene Tech. NovaGene Tech wasn't born in a glossy office tower or a gleaming laboratory. It was born in a quiet garage space just off Alma Street in Palo Alto, tucked between a yoga studio and a vegan bakery. The ceilings were low, the walls half-insulated, and the floor bore the stains of its former life as an auto repair shop. But to Lena Collins and Ethan Moore, it was a sanctuary. It was the blank canvas where their future would begin. The first morning they moved in, Ethan stood at the center of the empty space holding a box of pipettes and beakers. He looked around and smirked. "You know what this reminds me of?" Lena, carrying a folding table in both arms, raised an eyebrow. "Every startup cliché ever?" "Exactly," he said, laughing. "Except this time, we're going to get it right." There was no formal ceremony. No logo, no investor banners, no ribbon cutting. Just two people and the unwavering conviction that they were onto something bigger than themselves. Lena set up the table. Accessible and life-changing genetic diagnostics, because early matters. It was Lena's line. Her belief. Her anchor. In those first few months, they worked in obscurity, coding, experimenting. Troubleshooting, failing, and rebuilding. Every setback taught them something. Every small victory fueled them forward. They lived off takeout and instant ramen, sleeping in shifts and using whiteboards like wallpaper. Project Viridian, their flagship development, began as a hypothesis Lena had scribbled in a Caltech notebook. That certain rare degenerative disorders could be detected far earlier through RNA expression patterns long before symptoms manifested. If they could build a cheap, reliable screening kit based on that principle, they could save not just lives, but years of suffering. The challenge wasn't just science, it was trust. Investors didn't easily bet on long-term biotech solutions, especially from unknown founders, especially ones without last names like Gates or Musk. But Lena had an edge they hadn't seen before, an ability to translate hard science into human stories. She spoke of patients who lost their parents too soon, of mothers who misdiagnosed their child's illness for years, of her mentor, Dr. Tran, who had spent his last months unable to speak as ALS devoured his nervous system. She didn't pitch products. She pitched possibility. And slowly, the world started listening. Within 6 months, NovaGene Tech had secured its second round of seed funding, $1, and leased the second half of the garage. They even installed a coffee machine. But through it all, Lena remained fiercely private. Her name never appeared in full. Her photo was never published. She refused speaking engagements where press might attend. Even as other startup founders chased magazine covers, she quietly declined interviews. Ethan once asked her why. "You're the founder of one of the fastest-growing medtech startups in California. You could be on the cover of Wired tomorrow." Lena looked up from her notes. "That's not the story I want told." "What story do you want told?" She paused for a moment, then said, "That we made something that helped people without needing to shout about it." Ethan nodded slowly. He understood. Lena had nothing to prove to the world and everything to prove to herself. But the world had a way of catching up. As NovaGene's testing kits entered clinical trials, the buzz began to build. She didn't build NovaGene to flip it. She built it to change something. By the end of the year, their company was accepted into the U.S. Biotech Alliance Accelerator Program, a government-backed initiative supporting high-impact startups. For the first time, Lena stepped into federal-level boardrooms, her face obscured by a screen name, her results speaking louder than her presence ever could. Ethan handled most of the public-facing responsibilities. Lena preferred the lab, the data, the long hours no one ever applauded. PureHarvest Foods. Lena stared at the screen for a long time. The man who hadn't spoken to her in over a year, the man who once called her unmotivated and irrelevant, was now writing to request a meeting with NovaGene Tech. He didn't know. He didn't know that the company he was trying to save his business with was her. Lena didn't respond. Not yet. She closed the email and opened the lab fridge to check on the reagents. Her hands were steady, but her heart? It was beginning to stir. Not with revenge. Not even with resentment. With decision. Chapter 5. Andrew rises and looks down. To most of Seattle's elite, Andrew Collins had made it. At 36, he was the CEO of PureHarvest Foods, a boutique organic food company that had grown from a weekend farmer's market stall to a multimillion-dollar regional brand. His face was featured in Northwest Business Monthly. PureHarvest was in trouble. Sales had dipped after a major supplier went bankrupt. A new competitor, backed by Silicon Valley money, had swooped in with cheaper, flashier products and swept up nearly 40% of their West Coast market share. The pressure was mounting. Investors were getting nervous. And Vanessa? She had become increasingly tense, monitoring social media backlash and poring over negative reviews like they were personal attacks. "You need a miracle," she said one night over dinner, pushing a quinoa salad around her plate. "Or a powerful partner." Andrew didn't reply at first. He stared at his wine, swirling it like it held the answer. "We don't need a miracle," he said eventually. "We need a collaborator with R&D strength. Someone who can give us an edge." Vanessa leaned in, eyes sharp. "Like who?" Andrew opened his laptop. A rising star in the biotech world. Their recent pilot on personalized nutrition based on gene expression had gone viral in industry circles. The email suggested a meeting to explore joint solutions in the sustainable health and wellness market. Vanessa raised an eyebrow. NovaGene Tech? Aren't they based in Palo Alto? Yeah. Cutting-edge biotech, Andrew said, scrolling through the sparse company website. No public founder information. No photos. No press. Just results. So we don't even know who runs it? She asked skeptically. Don't need to. Whoever they are, they've got traction and funding. We get a deal with them, we stabilize. Maybe even expand. Vanessa nodded slowly, calculating. We go in strong. Charm them. Offer branding and distribution. We sell their science. They fund our pipeline. Andrew smirked. Exactly. The arrogance in his smile returned. That familiar. Dismissive tilt of his chin like the world was just a chessboard and he'd already won. He booked flights to Palo Alto that same evening. On the plane. The science was sophisticated beyond his full understanding, but what mattered was that investors were excited. That meant it was real. In his mind, NovaGene was a tool. An anonymous, faceless startup he could absorb, leverage, and possibly acquire once PureHarvest recovered. He didn't see it as a partnership. He saw it as a ladder out of the quicksand. And as for Lena? He hadn't thought of her in months. If he had, it would have been in passing, a vague recollection of that awkward dinner where she had mentioned a startup. Probably some niche website or tutoring app. He didn't connect any dots. Why would he? Lena, in his mind, still lived in that low-income studio, still rode buses, still scraped by, still irrelevant. The morning of the meeting, Andrew and Vanessa arrived at NovaGene's headquarters, a clean, angular building nestled in a quiet business park outside downtown Palo Alto. The reception area was minimalist, soft white walls, a single line of potted succulents, no plaques, no egos. A young assistant greeted them and offered matcha tea. "Please wait here. MS. Collins will be with you shortly," she said. Vanessa blinked. Collins. Andrew frowned. Probably just coincidence. They barely had time to whisper before the glass door opened. And Lena walked in. Wearing a black fitted blazer over a cream blouse, her hair pulled back, posture calm. She held a tablet in one hand and a pen in the other, her expression unreadable. Andrew stood up, stunned. Vanessa's jaw slackened. Lena looked from one to the other and gave the smallest nod. Andrew. Vanessa, she said evenly. Welcome to NovaGene Tech. Chapter 6. Crisis at PureHarvest. 3 weeks before their trip to Palo Alto, Andrew had stood in his office, staring out over Lake Union with a hollow feeling growing in his chest. From the outside, 3 consecutive quarters of loss, said Raj Patel, the CFO, tapping on the slide. And if the trend continues, Q4 projections show a 42% decline year over year. Andrew leaned forward, palms pressed flat against the table. That projection doesn't account for the launch of our new chia protein line. It does, Raj said flatly. We've already factored in the influencer campaign. It moved the needle, barely. The board was silent. Vanessa, sitting to Andrew's right, said nothing. Her expression was fixed, tense. Andrew rubbed his temples. Okay, so what's our real risk? Greenwashing campaigns that dance the line between innovation and desperation. Nothing stuck. Then Ethan Moore's email had arrived, and with it a slim thread of hope. NovaGene Tech wasn't just another biotech lab, it was different. It wasn't selling pills or flashy wearables. It was developing diagnostics that could shape how food was tailored to a person's actual body chemistry. Imagine a world, the press kit had said, where your breakfast cereal isn't just organic, but precisely calibrated to your genetic needs. Vanessa had clung to that vision. If we can co-brand, she said, if we can put our name on that kind of science, we change the game. Andrew had agreed. The proposal had been vague, but promising. NovaGene was interested in exploring applications of their gene diagnostics in consumer wellness products. It could be a perfect match. But now, sitting face-to-face with Lena, his sister, he felt the earth tilt. For a moment, no one moved. Lena broke the silence. Please have a seat. Andrew sat automatically, his limbs working ahead of his thoughts. Vanessa, still stiff, lowered herself into the leather conference chair as if it might bite. This is some kind of joke, right? Andrew said finally, forcing a laugh. You're working here? I own it, Lena replied, setting her tablet down. I founded NovaGene Tech 4 years ago. Ethan entered behind her, placing a file in front of each of them. We've prepared a collaboration proposal. You can review the full science background, but Lena, Dr. Collins, is the lead architect of the diagnostic model you were briefed on. Andrew stared at the folder. You're Dr. E.L. Collins. Lena nodded. Vanessa blinked slowly as if her brain had just rebooted. Wait, you're the founder? Of this company? But you thought I was a library assistant. Lena finished for her, her voice quiet but not unkind. Vanessa flushed. Andrew's throat went dry. The room was suddenly colder. How did this happen? He asked, voice low. I worked, Lena said simply. While you dismissed me. While you didn't ask. While you assumed I had nothing going for me. Ethan coughed lightly. Shall we move on to the proposal? Lena nodded and took a breath, slipping seamlessly into her professional rhythm. NovaGene's nutritional expression model can provide PureHarvest with customized wellness data integration, offering a unique, science-backed edge over competitors. We're willing to partner under specific terms. Andrew barely heard the words. His mind was reeling. The little sister he had ignored, belittled, and brushed off for years had built this. A multi-million-dollar company, a team of researchers, a name that now stood between him and financial collapse. And she didn't even look angry. She looked calm, controlled, powerful. Vanessa glanced down at the proposal, her hands slightly trembling. These terms, are they negotiable? Lena's eyes flicked to her, cool and unreadable. The tables had turned. But the game had only just begun. Chapter 7. The offer from Ethan Moore. The meeting room had returned to a quiet hum, the kind that follows after a storm, not destruction. But the uneasy calm where everyone realizes the winds have changed direction. Andrew Collins sat in silence, his jaw tense, his hands clasped over the unopened proposal packet. Of course, Lena's connection to your company gives us additional context. But our offer stands on its own merits. Andrew opened the file, his eyes scanning the first page with practiced speed. Charts, graphs, bullet points. He knew the dance. And yet, he couldn't concentrate. This wasn't just business. This was a reckoning. Ethan continued, gesturing toward the slides now displayed on the digital wall screen. Our model shows a 26% improvement in consumer retention when paired with genetic-based nutrition recommendations. That's correct, Ethan said. We're offering PureHarvest a 3-year partnership pilot, exclusive in the Pacific Northwest. You would be the first organic food company to implement our diagnostics directly into product packaging and marketing. Vanessa blinked. You're handing this to us? Ethan smiled faintly. No. We're offering to build it with you. Under specific shared conditions. Andrew leaned back in his chair, still shaken, but his business mind beginning to stir. The numbers were impressive. The projected gains, if real, could turn PureHarvest from a struggling boutique into a national player. You've done your homework, he admitted, nodding toward Ethan. We always do, Ethan replied. NovaGene retains all intellectual property rights to the diagnostic tech. Third, he paused, glancing at Lena. Lena serves as executive advisor to your nutrition R&D team for the duration of the pilot. Andrew's eyebrows rose. You want her embedded in our company? It's non-negotiable, Ethan said. Then the offer is withdrawn and we partner with one of your competitors. Which, frankly, we've already begun discussions with. Vanessa paled. Andrew felt the room spin again. It was a clean checkmate, delivered without flair. Lena wasn't threatening them. She was stating fact. He closed the folder slowly. You've changed, he said, finally meeting her eyes. Lena gave a small, tired smile. You just never really saw me to begin with. The silence that followed was thick and final. I'll need time to review this with the board, Andrew said, clearing his throat. Of course, Ethan replied. We'll send digital copies and leave you access to our data sandbox for 2 weeks. The meeting concluded with polite handshakes. Ethan escorted them out of the building while Lena remained in the conference room, collecting her notes in silence. Outside, Andrew and Vanessa stepped into the warm Palo Alto sun as if they'd just exited a courtroom. In the parking lot, Vanessa turned to Andrew. What just happened? Andrew didn't answer right away. He stared at the building behind them. He saw it differently now, not as some faceless startup, but as a fortress his sister had built with her own hands, while he was too busy dismissing her to notice. She grew up, he said finally. And we never did. Vanessa scoffed again, brushing her hair from her face. I can't work with her. I won't take orders from your little sister. She's not little anymore, Andrew said, his voice flat. He looked down at the file again. The name at the top, Dr. Lena L. Collins, founder and chief science officer. It no longer sounded strange. It sounded earned. Chapter 8. On the way to Silicon Valley. The silence in the rental car was thick enough to cut with a knife. Vanessa sat in the passenger seat, arms crossed tightly, scrolling her phone but not really reading anything. Andrew kept his eyes on the road, driving south on US 101 with a grin set to his jaw. I still can't believe she's the one behind all of this, Vanessa finally muttered. It doesn't make sense. She was always so soft, aimless. Andrew didn't respond. She didn't even finish grad school, did she? Vanessa pressed. She did, Andrew said quietly, eyes on the highway. Full scholarship. Caltech. Then she turned down a PhD to start her own lab. Vanessa turned her head sharply. You knew that? I read it somewhere. An old alumni article. He paused. Didn't think it was relevant. Vanessa scoffed, tossing her phone onto the dashboard. We never thought she was relevant. That hung in the air like smoke. Andrew gripped the steering wheel tighter. She never wanted the spotlight. Never bragged. Never tried to prove anything. Vanessa stared out the window. She didn't have to. Look where she is now. They exited into Menlo Park, where their hotel awaited, a sleek, modern place with a valet and glass facade. She looked at me like I was nobody, she said. In that meeting, Andrew exhaled. Maybe that's how she's felt her whole life. Inside, their suite was pristine. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of Stanford's tiled rooftops. Vanessa sat heavily on the edge of the bed while Andrew stood at the window. They had come to Silicon Valley expecting to outnegotiate some unknown startup for a lifeline. Now they found themselves at the mercy of someone they had dismissed at every turn. Worse still. Vanessa stood and began pacing. So, what, you want me to pretend we've always believed in her? That we respected her? She won't buy it. She doesn't want our respect, Andrew said, his voice low. She wants us to acknowledge the truth. Vanessa stopped walking. Which is? That we were wrong. The words fell heavy between them. Neither liked admitting weakness. Flipping open the proposal Ethan had handed them earlier, he reread the key sections, the 26% increase in customer retention, the proprietary biomarkers, the integration roadmap. It was brilliant. Lean, scientific, scalable. Lena hadn't just built a good company, she'd built the future of nutrition. And now, the future was staring them in the face, wearing the name they'd once rolled their eyes at across family dinners. We accept the terms, Andrew said suddenly. Vanessa blinked. What? We accept. Vanessa looked like she was about to argue, but then, slowly, she sat back down. Her expression shifted from indignation to something quieter. Hesitant. Maybe even regretful. She's different now, she said softly. She's always been different, Andrew replied. We just never paid attention. Vanessa leaned back against the chair, eyes tracing the lines of the ceiling. Do you think she'll forgive us? She asked. I don't know, Andrew said honestly, but I'm not asking for that right now. Then what are we asking for? Andrew looked down at the contract again. His jaw clenched. A second chance, not to be her brother, but to finally be worthy of calling her our partner. Chapter 9. A shocking arrival. The next morning, Andrew and Vanessa returned to NovaGene Tech headquarters. The California sun was bright and unforgiving, casting long shadows as they pulled into the underground parking garage. This time, I'll let you take the lead, she whispered. Just don't grovel too much. It'll look weak. Andrew didn't reply. A moment later, Ethan Moore appeared, every bit as crisp and composed as before. They're ready for you, he said. They followed him through the corridor of clean lines and quiet power until they entered the main conference room, Lena's domain. She stood by the tall window, arms crossed lightly, dressed in navy blue today, her expression unreadable. Andrew cleared his throat. "Thank you for seeing us again." Lena nodded once. "Of course." Ethan gestured for everyone to sit. "We understand you've reviewed the terms?" Andrew opened the briefcase and slid the contract across the table. "We have. And we're in." Lena reached forward, flipping through the pages silently. Vanessa watched her carefully, as if waiting for a crack in her calm, some sign of weakness. But Lena's composure never faltered. Finally, she placed the papers down and looked directly at them. "Before I sign, there's one last thing." Andrew straightened. "Yes." Lena glanced toward the door. "I've asked our department leads to sit in on this final meeting. They'll be overseeing integration on our side." Vanessa shifted uncomfortably. "Now, they should be arriving any minute," Lena said. Just as she finished speaking, the door opened, and in walked a team of 5 people, notebooks in hand, sharp-eyed and dressed like they belonged on the cover of a Forbes innovation issue. But Andrew only noticed one person, a tall man in a sharp gray suit who looked vaguely familiar. He leaned toward Vanessa. "Is that?" Vanessa's eyes widened in horror. "Yes," she whispered. "And the architect behind the aggressive pricing campaigns that had undercut PureHarvest in the past 6 months. The man had once told Andrew, to his face, 'We're not here to collaborate, we're here to bury you.' And now he was in Lena's boardroom. What is he doing here?" Vanessa asked, her voice rising. Lena's expression didn't change. "Unless this deal is finalized before the end of this week." Andrew's pulse spiked. "You didn't mention you were working with them." "You didn't ask," Lena replied calmly. Vanessa stood up suddenly. "This is a setup. You brought us here to humiliate us." "No," Lena said softly, her voice steady but cold. "You did that all by yourselves over years of dismissing, underestimating, and mocking me. I just let the truth show up on time." Ethan interjected, his tone firm. "We invited Jordan today only to observe. He will not be part of the PureHarvest collaboration if this deal is signed." Vanessa looked between them, furious. "You let our enemy into the room while pretending this was about helping us." Andrew remained seated, still processing. "So that's what this is? A game of leverage?" "No," Lena said again. "It's business. It's strategy. And it's what you never thought I was capable of." The room went silent. Jordan, seated quietly at the end of the table, her heels clicking like gunshots on the floor. Ethan calmly walked after her to smooth the situation. Andrew remained seated. He exhaled slowly, looking across at Lena, no longer his little sister, but a woman who had risen quietly, without applause, into someone far more powerful than he'd ever imagined. "You didn't have to do this," he said. "I didn't have to," Lena agreed. "But I chose to." She slid the contract back across the table. "You have until Friday to sign. After that, our timeline shifts." Andrew stared at the paper, then at her. He knew he had 2 choices. Swallow his pride or lose everything. Chapter 10. The Final Insult. Vanessa didn't wait for the elevator. She stormed down the stairs. The echo of her heels ricocheting through the steel and glass architecture of NovaGene Tech like gunshots in a gallery. How dare Lena play them like this? But because the girl she used to belittle over family dinners had outmaneuvered her in front of a room full of professionals. Worse, Jordan Hamill had seen it. She reached the parking lot, sliding into the driver's seat. Vanessa whipped around. "I made it worse?" She invited our competitor into the room and set us up for public humiliation. She gave us a chance to walk out with a partnership. And you walked out instead. "She used us, Andrew." "She didn't use us," he said, voice rising for the first time. Andrew stared out the windshield. "You don't have to. You just have to respect her. Which you never have." There was a long pause. Vanessa looked away, her voice low and bitter. Neither spoke as he started the engine and drove toward the hotel. Back at NovaGene's headquarters, Lena remained seated in the conference room after everyone had left. The contract still lay on the table unsigned. Her fingers rested lightly on its cover, her mind far from business. She should have felt vindicated. She should have relished the moment Vanessa stormed out and Andrew sat there stunned. For years, she had swallowed their passive-aggressive comments, endured their backhanded compliments, and tolerated the deep-rooted disdain they had masked as concern. But all she felt now was tired. Ethan re-entered quietly. "You okay?" Lena exhaled, her voice thin. "I thought I'd feel something more. Satisfaction, maybe. Relief." And he asked, settling into the chair beside her. "It just feels hollow." Ethan nodded. "That's what happens when you win the argument but lose the years." She gave a faint, almost sad smile. "They still see me as the girl with no direction. You've built something that speaks for itself. You don't have to keep translating your worth for people who never wanted to hear it." Lena nodded, slowly. "Just insists it's urgent." Ethan glanced at Lena. "Want me to send her away?" Lena hesitated, then shook her head. "No. Let her in." A few minutes later. "I want to say something before I leave the city," she replied. "And I want you to hear it from me, not filtered through Andrew." Lena raised an eyebrow, curious. "Go ahead." "You're still the same desperate girl looking for validation," she said coldly. "You built this empire so you could throw it in our faces. You used this meeting to remind us of every time we treated you like nothing. And you know what? It worked." She leaned in slightly. "Congratulations. You win. But don't pretend this was about business. This was about payback." Lena didn't flinch. She stood slowly, calmly, and walked toward Vanessa. "You think I built all of this just to get back at you?" Vanessa said nothing. "I stayed silent for years," Lena continued. "I let you diminish me, dismiss me, mock my choices. And I took it. Not because I was weak, but because I knew the truth would reveal itself in time." Her voice was still gentle, but now it carried steel. "You think I'm seeking revenge? I'm not. I'm seeking respect. And you still can't give it even when it's earned." Vanessa looked away. Lena leaned in slightly. "I didn't build NovaGene for you to notice me. I built it for the people whose lives were going to change. But if you feel like I've thrown something in your face, maybe it's because deep down you know you deserve it." Vanessa's breath hitched just a little. Then she turned and left without another word. Lena stood alone in the silence, finally exhaling. It wasn't justice. It wasn't peace. But it was enough. For now. Chapter 11. The CEO's Signature and a Conditional Future. The day after Vanessa's confrontation, the tension had settled into something quieter, more reflective. Lena arrived at the office early, as she always did, and stood for a moment in the lobby, staring up at the minimalist glass ceiling where sunlight trickled in like a gentle promise. Today was the deadline. If Andrew didn't return with a signed agreement by 5 p.m., NovaGene would proceed with Nutrivance. Ethan found her in the conference room, sipping tea and reading through an internal report. "Think he'll show?" he asked, pulling up a chair beside her. Lena didn't answer immediately. Then, "He's always been a strategist. He'll choose survival over pride. Eventually." Ethan smirked. "That's your brother you're talking about?" "Exactly," she replied. At 4:52 p.m., the front desk called. He simply said, "You were right." Lena didn't speak, letting the silence stretch. He set a folder on the table. The board approved the terms. All of them. She opened the folder slowly. Andrew sat across from her and laced his fingers together. "I didn't come just to drop off paperwork." She looked at him with quiet caution. "I came because I owe you an apology," he said. "Not just for underestimating you. For everything. For the years I treated you like your work didn't matter. Like you didn't matter." His voice was steady, but the rawness underneath was unmistakable. "I let pride get in the way. And jealousy, too, if I'm being honest. You had the courage to leave. To fail. To build something no one else understood. I never had that. Lena's expression softened, but only slightly. And now you're here because your survival depends on it. Andrew nodded. Yeah, that too. She closed the folder, tapping it lightly with her fingers. I'll sign. But on one condition. He tensed slightly. Another clause? No, she said. A personal condition. He waited. Lena met his eyes. If this partnership moves forward, we do it with transparency. That means no hiding who I am in the public rollout. No disguising my role. If the press asks, you tell them the truth, that your company is collaborating with mine. That your sister is leading the innovation. Andrew hesitated. Then, slowly, he nodded. Deal. She stood and extended her hand across the table. He rose and took it. There was a moment of quiet. Then, with a pen, Lena signed the agreement. It was done. Later that evening, Lena sat on the rooftop terrace of NovaGene, watching the lights of Silicon Valley shimmer in the dusk. The deal was official. The press release was scheduled for Monday. NovaGene and PureHarvest, a pioneering collaboration in gene-based nutritional science. Ethan joined her, 2 mugs of coffee in hand. You finally signed it, he said, handing her a mug. Yeah, she said, looking out over the horizon. I thought it would feel bigger. Does it? She paused. It feels necessary. They stood in silence for a moment. Ethan tilted his head. So what now? Lena smiled faintly. Now we work. Now we build. And we let the past do what it does best. What's that? A message from the past. 2 days after the contract was signed, Lena returned to her apartment late in the evening. NovaGene Tech and PureHarvest forged Genetic Nutrition Alliance. Sister leads the science behind brother's company revival. From invisible to indispensable. Lena Collins makes her mark. The press release included a photo of her standing next to Andrew, both of them composed and professional. Ethan had insisted on transparency. Lena had agreed. Even if it meant letting the world into a private history she hadn't fully processed herself. She dropped her bag onto the kitchen counter and made her way to the bookshelf. She wasn't looking for anything in particular, just a need to ground herself. Her fingers trailed over old journals, research binders, and college notebooks until they stopped at a worn, navy blue leather folder she hadn't opened in years. Her Caltech mentor, Dr. Elias Tran, had given it to her after their final lab session together. It had sat untouched since the week of his funeral. With hesitant fingers, Lena opened the folder. Inside, tucked between a yellowed certificate and a few research notes, was a single envelope, unmarked, sealed. Her breath caught. It was his handwriting. She opened it carefully, the paper fragile with time. The letter was dated 3 days before his death. Dear Lena, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. That's strange to imagine, but not strange enough to stop me from writing. You've always been different. Not because you're brilliant, though you are. And not because you're fearless, you're not, you're just brave enough to do things anyway. You're different because you listen. To silence. To people others ignore. To yourself. I've taught thousands of students, but only a few have reminded me why I became a scientist. You did on a Tuesday. Over burnt coffee and half a whiteboard filled with questions no one else bothered to ask. I know the world won't always be kind to you. It won't always notice you. But that's not your problem. That's the world's blindness. You don't need to get even. You just need to keep going. There will come a day when someone who once ignored you will need your help. Maybe they won't even recognize the hand that's saving them. And maybe you'll want to walk away. But if you can, don't. Offer your hand anyway. Not for them. For you. Because kindness on your terms is power. And forgiveness doesn't make you small. It means you're already big enough to carry the weight without it crushing you. Build something they can't tear down. And when they finally look up and see you, let them. But never stop looking forward. With quiet pride. E.T. Lena read the letter twice. Then again. She folded it slowly. Tears gathering in her eyes, but not falling, not quite. Dr. Tran had seen her long before anyone else did. Not just her intelligence, but her strength, her restraint, her capacity to choose power without cruelty. That letter felt like a permission slip she hadn't realized she'd been waiting for. It didn't erase the pain of the past, or justify how she'd been treated, but it reminded her of the choice she still had, to be the woman she had become on her own terms. She slid the letter into a new folder, labeled it Legacy, and placed it in the center of her shelf. Then she stood in the quiet glow of her apartment, staring out the window at the lights of Palo Alto. They were just specks, distant and flickering. But Lena Collins had never needed spotlights. She was made for the long glow, the steady one, the kind that outlasted storms. Chapter 13. The Shame of Vanessa. Vanessa Collins sat alone in her home office in Seattle, surrounded by silent monitors and unopened emails. The headlines still glowed faintly from her tablet screen. The Collins family business gets a second chance. She had read them all. Every article, every blog post. She wasn't surprised, but it still stung. Her inbox was a war zone, clients asking pointed questions, collaborators hesitating to commit. One email from a former investor was particularly brutal. In future partnerships, we suggest ensuring full transparency and internal alignment. Your comments about MS. All of it was unraveling at the hands of someone she had once dismissed as forgettable. She stared at the framed photo on her desk, her and Andrew at a charity gala, dressed in designer formals, smiling into the camera like they owned the world. But Lena had been absent from that photo, like she always was. And Vanessa had liked it that way. Her thoughts drifted to the early days of marriage. She had never hated Lena, no, that would require seeing her as a threat. Vanessa had simply never seen her at all. And now the entire world did. It was like waking up to find that a ghost had built an empire while you were busy laughing at its shadow. The final blow came during a staff meeting that afternoon. A junior brand strategist had brought up the NovaGene partnership, tentatively praising Lena's leadership and hinting that PureHarvest's new direction had greater integrity now. Vanessa curled up on the office couch, knees pulled to her chest, her laptop resting on the coffee table unopened. There was a knock on the door. Andrew entered, holding 2 mugs of tea. "I thought you might need this," he said. She took it without a word. He sat beside her in the fading light. "You okay?" he asked. Vanessa laughed bitterly. "Do I look okay?" "No," Andrew said honestly, "but I know that look. It's the same one I had the night we walked out of NovaGene the first time." She was quiet for a long time. "I didn't just underestimate her," Vanessa said finally. "I erased her. I made her feel small, invisible. And now I'm the one being erased." Andrew stared into his tea. "It hurts." Vanessa's voice broke slightly. "Do you think she'll ever forgive me?" "I don't know," he said. "But I don't think she's waiting for your apology anymore." Vanessa nodded. A tear slipped down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. "She's everything I pretended to be," she whispered. Andrew looked at her gently. "Then maybe it's time we stop pretending and start being better." She set the mug down and looked out the window. "I'm not ready to face her," she said. "You don't have to," Andrew replied. "But maybe you can start by facing yourself." That night, Vanessa opened her laptop and drafted a letter. Andrew Collins found himself in unfamiliar territory, not as the loudest voice in the room, but as the one who finally needed to listen. He was no longer the most powerful person at his own boardroom table. And oddly, he was okay with that. It started subtly. He stopped interrupting mid-sentence. He asked questions in meetings. He even attended a development workshop on ethical leadership, something the old Andrew would have mocked. His ego, once a towering shield, had cracked open just enough for growth to begin. But the change wasn't linear. There were moments when old habits crept back, moments of defensiveness, the need to control. Yet every time, he heard Lena's voice in his head. Steady and cold from that first meeting. You never really saw me. He was starting to. Now, he wanted to be someone worth seeing too. One afternoon, during a joint NovaGene, PureHarvest strategy session in Palo Alto, Andrew asked Lena if she had time for lunch, just the two of them. She hesitated, then nodded. Andrew stirred his iced tea, his words slower than usual. I read Dr. Tran's last article. The one about early RNA drift in ALS patients. It was incredible. Lena blinked. You read that? I'm trying to learn, he said, then added, trying to catch up, I guess. A pause. Then, you don't have to catch up. Just be honest. Andrew looked up, meeting her eyes. I'm trying. But there's something I haven't said. Something I should have said a long time ago. Lena said nothing, waiting. I was jealous of you, he said. Even when I thought I was ahead. You had purpose. Lena didn't respond right away. Her fingers tightened slightly around her glass. Then she said, quietly, I used to wonder what was wrong with me. Why I couldn't earn your approval. And you did. I don't need your apology, she added. But I respect it. That, more than anything, hit Andrew hardest. Because she meant it. She wasn't holding forgiveness over his head like a prize. She wasn't trying to humiliate him or withhold closure. She had simply moved beyond him. And now he had to decide if he could catch up, not in accolades, but in character. Will you ever trust me again? He asked. Lena looked at him, not harshly, but truthfully. Trust isn't something you ask for, she said. It's something you become. That evening, Andrew returned to his hotel room and opened his laptop. He stared at the blinking cursor on a blank email screen. Then he began typing. Subject, for the record. To all staff, I want to acknowledge the incredible leadership of Dr. Lena Collins, without whom this partnership would not exist. Her vision and integrity have set a new standard. And I ask that everyone at PureHarvest not only support this collaboration, but learn from it. She is not just my sister. She is the future of what we aim to be. Andrew Collins, CEO, PureHarvest Foods. He hit send before he could second-guess himself. Somewhere in Palo Alto, Lena's phone buzzed with a notification. She read the email, then stared at it for a long time. She didn't reply. But she saved it. Chapter 15, the final contract, with a human clause. A month into the NovaGene, PureHarvest partnership, operations were smoother than expected. NovaGene's algorithms had already improved consumer response rates by 18%. Custom nutrition plans were piloting across the Pacific Northwest, and focus groups praised the science meets simplicity concept. Even investors who once doubted Andrew were now praising his visionary pivot. But Lena knew the truth. The pivot hadn't been Andrew's. It had been hers. Still, the numbers weren't what lingered in her mind. It was the silences. The quiet email Andrew sent, praising her. The moment he sat in on a team meeting and deferred to her expertise without flinching. The day Vanessa's assistant forwarded an internal memo she'd drafted, attributing a PureHarvest campaign success to Dr. Collins's insight. It was progress. Uneven, but real. And now, as the final collaboration contract neared its Phase 2 signing, expanding the pilot to full national rollout, Lena asked Ethan to schedule a personal meeting with Andrew. No lawyers. No assistants. No board members. Just her and him. They met again in the same NovaGene conference room where everything had shifted. This time, Lena wore no blazer, no heels. She said slowly, to treat your next generation of hires, especially the quiet ones, the way you should have treated me. He blinked, caught off guard. I want you to see the ones who don't speak loudly. The interns with no connections. The young researchers without designer resumes. the ones who hesitate before raising their hand. Lena leaned forward. Because I was that girl. And you taught me I didn't matter. Until I mattered too much to ignore. Andrew looked down, his throat tight. You want me to promise that? He asked. I want you to mean it. He nodded, slowly. You have my word. Lena's expression softened. I'm not asking for perfection. I'm asking for awareness. For growth. For a company culture that doesn't wait for someone to become a CEO before they're taken seriously. Andrew's voice was quiet. You've already changed our company more than you know. I'm not finished, she replied, then added gently, neither are you. He took a deep breath, then extended his hand. This time, Lena shook it not as a symbolic gesture of truce, but as a pact. A human clause, written not in ink, but in intention. 2 weeks later, PureHarvest launched its first national product line co-branded with NovaGene. Harvested for You, a line of personalized nutrition kits built from user-submitted genetic diagnostics. The rollout was a media success, but the real victory came from inside the company. Lena received a message from a young PureHarvest nutritionist named Maya. Dr. Collins. I just wanted to say thank you. I've been at PureHarvest for 2 years. Always told I was too soft-spoken to lead. Last week, Andrew invited me to co-lead a product development panel. He said he sees potential in me. I don't think that would have happened before you. Thank you for helping change what leadership looks like. Maya. Lena read the message, then leaned back in her chair. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel it fully. Not just success, but peace. She didn't win by proving them wrong. She won by showing what was possible when someone finally believed in the person they had once overlooked. Even if that person had to believe in herself first. Chapter 16. The first day of working together. The NovaGene, PureHarvest integration officially began on a Wednesday. It was the kind of day that looked ordinary on the surface, emails, Zoom calls, schedule conflicts, but beneath it was something rare, the slow, awkward first steps of healing. Lena Collins arrived at PureHarvest Seattle headquarters early, her visitor badge clipped to her blazer, a laptop tucked under one arm. Though the contract named her executive advisor on nutritional innovation, she hadn't come to wield power. She came to observe, to influence from within. And perhaps, see what a repaired bridge might look like. The front desk staff recognized her instantly. Their voices were polite but reverent, as if she were both celebrity and myth. Dr. Collins, Mr. Collins is waiting for you in the R&D wing, one said, gesturing to the elevators. Thank you, Lena replied with a small nod. As the elevator doors closed, she caught her own reflection in the brushed steel. Composed, prepared, but not immune. A tiny flicker of anxiety stirred in her chest. The doors opened to a sunlit hallway lined with whiteboards, idea walls, and clusters of collaborative desks. It smelled like mint tea and dry erase markers, young, ambitious, imperfect. Andrew was waiting by the meeting room. He smiled, uncertain but sincere. You're early. You're surprised, she replied with a faint smile. Not really. He led her inside where a small team was already gathered. Maya, the young nutritionist who had emailed her, 2 senior food scientists, and a marketing liaison. I'm here to help sharpen them. Maya smiled first, then the others nodded. And so it began. They reviewed data from the first diagnostic kits, discussed consumer trends, and brainstormed how to translate genomic results into product suggestions that didn't feel like medical reports. Lena brought nuance. Maya brought innovation. Energy returning. Andrew watched quietly from the corner. He didn't interrupt. He didn't correct. He let her lead. And, for the first time, Lena felt what cooperation might actually look like, not the forced, public truce of a press release, but the raw, careful building of something shared. After lunch, as the team dispersed, Andrew approached her by the window. I wanted to show you something, he said. If you have a minute. She followed him to a small room near the corner of the floor. It used to be Vanessa's office. We didn't know how strong she was until she stopped waiting for us to notice. Lena turned to Andrew slowly. You did this. He nodded. I wanted the team to know who they're working with. Lena's eyes didn't water, but her chest felt heavier than it had in days. Not with pain, but with acknowledgement. For once, not applause. Just truth. Andrew hesitated, then added, I know I can't undo years of being the wrong kind of brother, but I want to learn how to be better. She looked at him, her voice soft but firm. Then start by showing up. Consistently. Quietly. Without needing credit. He nodded. Deal. That evening, back at her hotel, Lena sat by the window watching the Seattle rain return in soft streaks across the glass. It wasn't a grand moment. To rebuild not with words, but with time. No applause. No spotlight. Just the quiet architecture of trust, layered, slow, real. Chapter 17. Lena is no longer the girl they underestimated. It happened gradually. The way whispers turned into recognition. The way glances turned into deference. At first, when Lena walked through the halls of PureHarvest's headquarters, she felt like a stranger. A silent partner. A guest. But within weeks, something shifted. Colleagues who once barely acknowledged her presence now leaned in when she spoke. Younger staff, not just from the nutrition team, but from logistics, operations. Even marketing sought her out during lunch breaks, asking questions, pitching ideas, wanting to learn from her. Not the name behind a logo. Not the sister of the CEO. But her. Lena. Dr. Collins. You're like a quiet lightning bolt, she told Lena one afternoon. You don't ask for attention, but when you speak, everyone feels it. Lena smiled. It was the kindest metaphor anyone had ever used for her. Still, there were moments when the past tugged at her, like a loose thread she couldn't quite pull free. One morning, during a company town hall, Andrew introduced Lena before her presentation. His tone was respectful, warm, and public. But the moment that stayed with her came after the meeting, in a side hallway, where one of the older senior managers, Jason, someone who had once called her Andrew's introverted sibling, approached her. I misjudged you, he said bluntly. Years ago. I thought quiet meant incapable. That was my mistake. Lena looked at him, measuring the sincerity in his voice. Then she nodded once. Thank you. He extended his hand. She shook it. No performance. Leaning back in his chair during a late-night call. Not like someone fighting to be heard, but like someone who already is and doesn't need to prove it anymore. Lena smiled faintly. I think I'm learning to breathe. The success of the partnership began to show in numbers. PureHarvest's declining market share began to climb, supported by a new wave of genetically tailored product launches. NovaGene's diagnostics were now a household term in several West Coast cities, praised for being both affordable and impactful. The media shifted its tone, now calling the collaboration not just a business success, but a masterclass in strategic redemption. And still, Lena stayed out of the spotlight. No interviews. No podcasts. No panels. She let the work speak. But within those glass walls of PureHarvest, everyone knew exactly who had turned the ship around. One afternoon, Andrew stopped by NovaGene for a check-in meeting. After they wrapped up business, he lingered in her office. He glanced around the room, simple, organized, with a few framed articles and a whiteboard filled with charts. But what caught his eye was a photo on the shelf, Lena and Dr. Tran, both smiling, both holding a hand-drawn genome map. Was he the one who believed in you first? Andrew asked. Lena followed his gaze. Yes. He never tried to change who I was. He just gave me space to become more of it. Andrew nodded slowly. I wish I had done the same. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. He turned to go, but paused at the door. You know, you're not the girl I used to underestimate, he said quietly. And I'm not the man who used to underestimate you. Lena looked at him, really looked. Then maybe, she said, we're both finally who we were meant to be. He smiled. This time, not with charm. With relief. Then he left. That night, as Lena locked up her office, she passed a bulletin board near the elevator. A hand-drawn flyer caught her eye. Quiet Leaders Panel, featuring Dr. Lena Collins. Below it were notes written in different handwriting. Her story changed how I see myself. Thank you for showing us what real strength looks like. Representation matters. So does humility. Lena smiled. They still didn't cheer. They didn't need to. She had become more than the girl they underestimated. She had become the woman they learned from. Chapter 18. Vanessa cries in a staff meeting. The email read. Subject: Internal alignment review. All marketing team leads required. Time: 10 a.m. Friday. Location: PureHarvest 4th floor boardroom. Vanessa Collins had stared at it for nearly 20 minutes before she finally RSVP'd. She had been avoiding larger meetings since the NovaGene partnership went public, preferring to manage her subteams quietly and from a distance. Outwardly, she told herself it was about streamlining. But in truth, it was shame. She wasn't used to being in a room where her authority felt diluted. She had built a career on sharp strategy and sharper tone. But ever since Lena entered the building as a partner, not a relative, everything had changed. The hushed tones behind her back. The younger team members who now looked past her to Maya. The staff meetings where Lena's name was spoken with respect that used to be reserved for her. And now, here she was. The once untouchable VP of marketing, suddenly optional. She wore a cream blazer that morning, crisp and formal. Her heels clicked authoritatively down the hallway, even if her stomach churned with anxiety. The boardroom was half full when she arrived. Maya was already there, reviewing slides. Lena entered moments later, holding a notebook and a cup of tea, greeting people with a polite nod. They made eye contact, just briefly. Vanessa looked away first. The meeting began. It was supposed to be procedural, reviewing campaign language, rollout strategies, customer feedback. Lena presented calmly, mapping out Phase 2 targets, then handed the floor to the marketing team. Vanessa stood, voice steady as she began her portion. She outlined consumer response trends, market penetration, and ad spend. Her slides were precise. Her tone, practiced. But somewhere, halfway through the deck, her words faltered. Not because she had forgotten the numbers. Because she suddenly felt them pressing against her throat, the years of pretending she was always in control, the brittle pride she had built her life on. The sharp way she had dismissed Lena at every family dinner, and now sat here, watching that same woman quietly lead the room without needing to prove anything. Her voice cracked just slightly when she said the words team cohesion. She paused. Someone handed her a bottle of water. She waved it off. "I'm sorry," she murmured, but her throat tightened again. Her breath caught. And then, the unthinkable happened. Tears welled in her eyes, uninvited, unmanageable. She blinked rapidly. She turned away, but a single tear escaped, rolling down her cheek. The room fell into stunned silence. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. It was human. Lena rose without a word and walked to the front. She stood beside Vanessa, gently placed a hand on her arm. "Is that all I'll ever get from you?" "I don't know yet," Lena said. "But this is a start." There was no dramatic music, no embrace, no perfect ending. But there was a moment, a pause between two women who had once shared a last name and now shared something harder, accountability. Vanessa wiped her face and stood. "Thank you for not humiliating me." Lena's reply was simple. "That was never my goal." 10 minutes later, they returned to the room. No one mentioned the tears. No one needed to. But something had shifted. People spoke softer, listened longer, And when Vanessa finished her report, this time, it ended with quiet applause. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. And sometimes, healing begins when we allow ourselves to be seen, broken, flawed, but willing. Chapter 19. Andrew wants to heal, but will she let him? It had taken Andrew Collins 37 years to realize that apology was not a finish line. It was a door. And whether it opened or stayed shut, well, that part wasn't up to him. He sat on a bench outside NovaGene's glass facade, watching staff move through the lobby with calm efficiency. From this angle, the building looked like something out of the future, clean, intentional, built to last. So much like Lena. He hadn't told her he was coming today. He didn't want to make an appointment. He wanted this to be real. Not staged, not corporate. Just honest. Inside, Lena had just wrapped up a weekly leadership meeting with Ethan and the R&D team. She stepped out into the hallway, tablet in hand, and paused when she saw him through the glass. Her first instinct was wariness, then curiosity. Then, finally, she walked outside. "Did you lose your badge?" she asked. Standing in front of him with that dry half-smile that never reached her eyes unless she really meant it, Andrew looked up. "No. Just didn't want this to be scheduled." Lena sat down beside him. "Not too close." He looked down at his hands. "You know, I thought once the partnership was working, once I admitted I was wrong and followed your lead, that things would just click again. I need one who would have stood by me when no one else did. I want to become that," he said. "Even if it takes the rest of my life." Lena finally turned to him. There was no warmth in her eyes. But there was no anger either. Just clarity. "Then start by being present. Without fixing. Without explaining. Just be there." Andrew nodded, eyes damp. "I can do that." Lena stood. "We're launching the new pilot campaign next week. If you want to be part of the press walkthrough, show up early. Carry boxes. Talk less." He looked up at her, a half-laugh escaping. "Seriously?" "Seriously," she said. "No one respects a rebrand if it's just PR." He nodded again. She walked toward the doors, then stopped. Turned. "I haven't decided if I forgive you yet," she said quietly. "But I'm willing to see who you become next." Then she disappeared into the building, leaving Andrew alone on the bench, heart pounding. Not with regret this time, but with something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Chapter 20. Forgiveness begins, but the past is never erased. The sun was just beginning to dip behind the city skyline when Lena stood at the glass wall of her office, laughing as he helped unbox boxes of promotional displays for the next phase of the product launch. His blazer was folded over a chair, his sleeves rolled up. No cameras, no speeches, just effort. Lena watched him for a long moment. Not as the brother who had hurt her, not as the CEO trying to rebuild his image, but as a man learning how to show up differently. That afternoon, he had walked into the office at 7:45 a.m. carrying coffee. For the entire team. He didn't announce it. He didn't hashtag it. He just handed each person their preferred order with a quiet smile and got to work assembling materials. For Lena, it was vanilla black tea. No sugar. He had remembered. And it wasn't the tea that moved her, it was the fact that he'd listened. That he'd taken something small, something unnoticed, and held it in his memory without fanfare. Forgiveness, she realized, never came with a finish line or a celebration. It came in these moments. Quiet, repeated, steady. Later that evening, as the office lights dimmed and most of the staff headed out, Andrew stopped by Lena's door. He knocked once, then leaned in. "Heading out," he said. She looked up. "You earned it." He smiled, then hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." She opened her journal and wrote just one line. "Healing isn't forgetting. It's choosing to move forward anyway." Below it, she added, "And sometimes, Even the people who hurt you can learn how to help you heal. Then she closed the book, looked out into the evening sky, and allowed herself to feel something she hadn't dared name for years. Peace. Not because the past was erased, but because she no longer needed it to be. Chapter 1.